The story of King Solomon is a timeless lesson. It speaks to every one of us. It's a tale about the heights a person can reach and, honestly, the depths to which they can fall. It reminds us that wisdom, wealth, and power are not enough to secure a life of peace. Beneath the shimmering gold of Solomon's legendary kingdom lies a darker story, a hidden struggle. It's the story of a man who could master the world, but failed to master himself. This isn't just history. It's really a mirror, reflecting the eternal battle that rages within the human soul, a battle for the kingdom of our own heart. The roots of Solomon's story begin not with him, but with his father, King David. David was a great king, a man described as being after God's own heart. Yet, even the greatest among us can stumble. From the roof of his palace, David saw a woman named Bathsheba. His desire for her led him down a dark path. He brought her to his palace, and from their union, a child was conceived. This single act of weakness set in motion a chain of events that would echo through generations, casting a long shadow over the future of his royal line and the destiny of his kingdom. To hide his transgression, David's choices grew darker. He called Bathsheba's husband Uriah home from war, hoping he would be with his wife and believe the child was his own. But Uriah was a man of honor. He refused the comforts of his home while his comrades remained on the battlefield. So David sent Uriah back to the front lines, carrying his own death sentence in a sealed letter. Uriah was placed where the fighting was fiercest and was killed. David then took Bathsheba as his wife, but his actions did not go unnoticed by a higher power. The prophet Nathan came before the king and exposed his sin. David was filled with remorse, but the consequences were irreversible. Nathan declared that because of David's actions, violence would never leave his house. The child born to David and Bathsheba died, a heartbreaking price for a king's failing. However, in time, another son was born to them. They named him Solomon, which means peace. This child, born from a story of tragedy and repentance, was destined to inherit a kingdom, a promise, and the heavy burden of his father's past. As King David grew old, the stability of his kingdom became fragile. His ambitious elder son, Adonijah, attempted to seize the throne for himself, but David had made a promise to Bathsheba that Solomon would be his heir. With the help of the prophet Nathan, Solomon was quickly and officially anointed as the new king of Israel. Upon his deathbed, David charged his young son to be strong, to walk in the ways of God, and to bring justice to the kingdom. Solomon's reign began by securing his power, dealing with the threats that his father had left behind, and consolidating his rule over the 12 tribes of Israel. The immense responsibility of his new role weighed heavily on the young king. He was now the shepherd of an entire nation, the judge for a multitude of people. He understood that his own strength and knowledge were not enough for such a monumental task. Solomon traveled to Gibeon, a great high place of worship, to seek guidance. There, he made a grand gesture of devotion, offering 1,000 sacrifices to God. He was showing his humility and his desperate need for something greater than himself to guide his path forward. It was an act that would change his life forever. That night, as Solomon slept, God appeared to him in a dream. The offer was simple and profound. Ask for whatever you want me to give you. In that moment, Solomon could have asked for anything. He could have requested immense riches to make his kingdom the wealthiest on earth. He could have asked for a long life to enjoy his reign, or for the power to crush all his enemies. These are the desires that often consume the hearts of kings and rulers. But Solomon's heart was in a different place. He saw the true need of his position. Humbly, Solomon made his request. He did not ask for personal gain or worldly power. Instead, he asked for a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. He asked for wisdom. He recognized that the greatest tool a leader could possess was the ability to understand, to judge fairly, and to lead with insight. This selfless and humble prayer pleased God greatly. It revealed a character that was not focused on itself, but on the well-being of the people he was chosen to lead. God was so moved by Solomon's selfless request that he granted him his heart's desire, and so much more. He promised Solomon a wise and understanding heart, one unlike any king who had come before him or any who would come after. His name would become synonymous with wisdom itself. But God's generosity did not stop there. Because Solomon had not asked for them, God also gave him the things that other men craved, riches and honor. Solomon would become a king of unparalleled wealth and fame, his glory known throughout the known world. He awoke from his dream a changed man, endowed with a divine gift. It was not long before Solomon's newfound wisdom was put to a dramatic test. A case was brought before him that seemed impossible to solve. Two women came to his court, both living in the same house, and both claiming to be the mother of a single surviving newborn baby. One woman's baby had died in the night, and she had allegedly swapped the infants while the other slept. Now, both stood before the king, each desperately claiming the living child as her own. There were no witnesses, only the conflicting and emotional testimonies of the two mothers. The court was silent, as the king considered the dilemma. How could anyone possibly know the truth? Then, with a calm authority that stunned everyone present, Solomon called for a sword. He looked at the two women and delivered his shocking verdict. Cut the living child in two and give half to one and half to the other. The command was horrifying, a brutal solution to an unsolvable problem. The people in the court must have held their breath, wondering if their new king was not wise, but cruel and mad. The king's true intention was immediately revealed. One woman stood firm, agreeing to the judgment. "Neither I nor you shall have him. Cut him in two," she said, her heart hardened by jealousy. But the other woman, the true mother, cried out in anguish. Her love for her child was greater than her desire to possess him. "Please, my lord, give her the living baby. Don't kill him," she begged. In that moment of pure, selfless love, the truth was laid bare. Solomon pointed to the weeping woman and declared, "Give the living baby to her, she is his mother." News of this judgment spread like wildfire, and all of Israel knew they had a king with the wisdom of God. With his kingdom secure and his wisdom renowned, Solomon set out to fulfill a dream that his father, David, had been unable to achieve. David had been a man of war, and while he had gathered the materials and made the plans, he was told that the task of building a permanent house for God would fall to his son, a man of peace. Solomon took up this sacred duty with great purpose. He wanted to build a temple in Jerusalem that would be a magnificent dwelling place for the Ark of the Covenant and a central place of worship for all of Israel. The project was massive in scale, requiring incredible resources and international cooperation. Solomon formed a strategic and friendly alliance with Hiram, the king of Tyre, a powerful coastal city famous for its skilled craftsmen and vast forests. In exchange for food supplies from Israel, Hiram provided Solomon with the finest materials imaginable: giant, fragrant cedars and durable cypress logs from the legendary forests of Lebanon. Tens of thousands of laborers were conscripted for the work, some to cut the timber in the mountains, and others to quarry and shape the massive stones for the foundation and walls. The construction of the temple was a marvel of planning and reverence. For 7 years, the work continued. A remarkable detail of the process was that the stones were hewn and finished at the quarry itself. They were then transported to the temple site on Mount Moriah and fitted together perfectly. As a result, the sound of a hammer, chisel, or any iron tool was never heard at the building site. The temple rose in a kind of sacred silence, a testament to the meticulous care and holy intention behind its creation. It was a structure built not just with hands, but with devotion. When the temple was finally complete, Solomon gathered all the leaders and people of Israel for a grand dedication ceremony. The priests carried the Ark of the Covenant, which contained the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments, into the most holy place within the temple. As they did, a thick, radiant cloud, the divine glory of God, filled the entire structure, so powerfully that the priests could not even stand to perform their duties. Fire then descended from heaven, consuming the sacrifices on the altar. It was a clear and spectacular sign of God's acceptance. This moment marked the absolute pinnacle of Solomon's reign, a symbol of national unity and divine favor. Under Solomon's wise rule, the kingdom of Israel entered an unprecedented era of peace and prosperity. It was a true golden age. The strategic alliances he formed, his control over major trade routes, and his reputation for justice created a stable environment where commerce and culture could really flourish. The Bible poetically describes silver and gold being as common in Jerusalem as stones, and valuable cedar wood as abundant as the common sycamore trees in the foothills. The nation was not just surviving, it was thriving beyond anyone's wildest dreams, becoming a beacon of wealth and power in the ancient world. Solomon's navy, built in partnership with King Hiram, sailed to distant lands and returned with incredible treasures: gold, silver, ivory, and exotic animals like apes and baboons. Caravans crossed the deserts, bringing spices, precious stones, and other luxuries to his court. His personal wealth became legendary, with an income of gold that was staggering even by the standards of powerful empires. He built a magnificent palace for himself, a project that took 13 years to complete, and furnished it with wonders like a grand throne of ivory, overlaid with the purest gold. The king's fame was not just for his riches, but for his profound wisdom. Rulers and scholars from all over the world traveled to Jerusalem to hear his insights and witness the splendor of his kingdom. The most famous of these visitors was the Queen of Sheba, a powerful monarch from a distant, wealthy kingdom in the south, likely in modern-day Yemen or Ethiopia. She had heard the reports of Solomon's wisdom and prosperity but was skeptical. She came to test him herself, bringing a great caravan laden with spices, gold, and precious stones as gifts. The queen presented Solomon with a series of hard questions and riddles designed to challenge the sharpest of minds. But nothing she asked was too difficult for him. He answered every one of her queries with clarity and depth, revealing an understanding that was truly divine. The queen was utterly astonished. She looked at his magnificent palace, the food on his tables, the organization of his officials, and the grandeur of the temple, and she was left breathless. She confessed to the king, "The half was not told me. In wisdom and wealth you have far exceeded the report I heard." In the midst of this incredible success, the seeds of Solomon's downfall were being quietly sown. While his wisdom was a gift from God, his political strategies were a matter of human calculation to secure his kingdom's borders and forge powerful alliances with surrounding nations. Solomon engaged in a common practice for kings of his time: political marriages. He took wives and concubines from many different lands: Egypt, Moab, Ammon, Edom, and Sidon. His harem grew to an astonishing size, with 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines. These marriages were, at first, a tool of statecraft. Each union with a foreign princess created a bond of peace and a treaty of cooperation with another kingdom. It was a way to prevent wars and ensure the safety of his trade routes. However, these foreign women did not come to Israel alone. They brought with them their own cultures, their own customs, and most significantly, their own gods. The law given to Israel had explicitly warned against intermarrying with people from these nations, not out of prejudice, but for a very specific reason: for they will surely turn your heart away after their gods. In his youth and middle age, Solomon's devotion to the God of Israel remained strong. He had built the magnificent temple and led the nation in worship. He likely believed he was wise enough and strong enough to manage the foreign influences within his own household. He may have seen the private worship of his wives as a harmless concession, a necessary part of maintaining his political alliances. But the constant, gentle pressure from those he loved began to have a subtle and corrosive effect on his spirit. The whispers of his wives were a constant presence in his palace. As Solomon grew older, his heart, which had once so clearly belonged to God, began to drift. The Bible states that his wives turned his heart after other gods. What began as tolerance for their beliefs slowly transformed into participation. He started to accommodate their religious practices, not just privately, but publicly. A man who had built a house for the one true God now found himself building shrines for idols. The very wisdom that had made him great failed to protect him from the slow erosion of his own convictions, proving that no one is immune to the influences of those they hold closest. The turning of Solomon's heart was not a secret, hidden act. It became a public display that directly violated his covenant with God. The king, who had prayed for a discerning heart to know right from wrong, began to openly blur that line. On the hills surrounding Jerusalem, in the very shadow of the great temple he had built, Solomon constructed high places of worship for the gods of his foreign wives. He built an altar for Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and for Milcom, the detested idol of the Ammonites. He even built shrines for Chemosh and Molech, the gods of Moab, deities associated with horrific rituals. This was a profound betrayal. The God who had appeared to him twice, who had blessed him with unparalleled wisdom, riches, and honor, had given him one primary command: do not follow other gods. Now Solomon was not just allowing their worship, he was actively facilitating it. He was using the wealth and resources of Israel to promote the very idolatry he had been commanded to oppose. The nation's spiritual leader had become its chief enabler of false worship. The foundation of his kingdom, which was built on divine favor, was beginning to show deep and dangerous cracks. The consequences of this spiritual rebellion were not long in coming. God's judgment was declared directly to Solomon, because he had broken the sacred covenant and failed to keep the commands he was given. The kingdom would be torn away from him. It was a devastating sentence. The unified nation of Israel, which his father David had fought to establish and which he had brought to its golden age, would be fractured. The work of 2 lifetimes would be undone because of his failure to guard his own heart against foreign influences and temptations. However, God's judgment was tempered with mercy, a testament to the promise he had made to Solomon's father, David. For David's sake, God would not tear the kingdom apart during Solomon's own lifetime. Solomon would be allowed to finish his reign over a united Israel, but the division was inevitable and would fall upon his son and heir. Furthermore, God promised that he would not take the entire kingdom away from the house of David. One tribe, the tribe of Judah, would remain loyal to his descendants, preserving a remnant of the once great empire. As God's favor began to lift, the peace and security that had defined Solomon's reign started to crumble. The protective shield around his kingdom weakened, and adversaries who had once been held in check began to rise up against him. From the south, an old enemy of Israel, Hadad, the Edomite, who had escaped to Egypt as a boy, returned to his homeland. He became a persistent thorn in Solomon's side, harassing the southern borders of the kingdom and disrupting the valuable trade routes that flowed through the region. The era of absolute peace was over. Another threat emerged in the north. A man named Rezin, who had once served a foreign king defeated by David, seized control of the city of Damascus. He established his own kingdom in Aram and harbored a deep-seated hatred for Israel. For the remainder of Solomon's reign, Rezin was a constant adversary, launching raids and creating instability along the northern frontier. The once invincible empire of Solomon was now being assailed from both the north and the south. The external pressures were a direct reflection of the internal decay that had taken root in the king's heart. The most significant threat, however, came not from outside the kingdom, but from within. A talented and capable young man from the tribe of Ephraim named Jeroboam was an official in Solomon's administration. He was in charge of the laborers from the northern tribes. One day, as Jeroboam was leaving Jerusalem, he was met by the prophet Ahijah. The prophet performed a dramatic symbolic act. He took the new cloak he was wearing and tore it into 12 pieces, representing the 12 tribes of Israel. The prophet then handed 10 of the torn pieces to Jeroboam. He delivered a stunning message directly from God. The kingdom was going to be divided. Because Solomon had turned to idolatry, God would tear 10 tribes away from his son's rule and give them to Jeroboam. When Solomon learned of this prophecy and realized that Jeroboam was now a divinely appointed rival to his dynasty, he sought to kill him. The wise king had become a paranoid tyrant. Jeroboam, however, managed to escape and fled to Egypt, where he found refuge and waited for the prophecy to come to pass. After a long reign of 40 years, filled with glorious achievements and heartbreaking failures, King Solomon died and was buried in the city of David, the city of his father. His son Rehoboam inherited the throne. The moment of truth had arrived. The leaders of the northern tribes, with the newly returned Jeroboam as their spokesman, came to the new king with a reasonable request. They asked him to lighten the heavy burden of labor and taxes that Solomon had imposed upon them during his many ambitious building projects. It was a critical moment that would decide the future of the nation. Rehoboam first consulted the old, wise elders who had served his father. They gave him sound advice. They told him to be a servant to the people, to speak kindly to them, and grant their request. If he did, they would serve him loyally forever. But Rehoboam rejected their counsel. He turned instead to the young, arrogant men he had grown up with. They advised him to show strength and dominance. They told him to declare that his little finger was thicker than his father's waist, and that while Solomon had disciplined them with whips, he would discipline them with scorpions. Following this disastrous advice, Rehoboam delivered his harsh reply to the people. His arrogance and refusal to listen sealed the kingdom's fate. The 10 northern tribes immediately renounced their allegiance to the house of David. They declared, "What share do we have in David? What part in Jesse's son? To your tents, Israel." They made Jeroboam their king, and the unified kingdom was shattered, just as the prophet had foretold. Only the tribes of Judah and Benjamin remained loyal to Rehoboam. The Golden Age was definitively over, replaced by decades of rivalry and warfare between the two divided kingdoms. The story of Solomon ends not just with the division of a nation, but with a profound and personal lesson. The ultimate tragedy was not the loss of territory or the fall of a political empire. It was the collapse of the kingdom within Solomon's own soul. He was given the wisdom to rule a great nation, to render perfect judgments, and to build a house for God. Yet he lacked the wisdom to rule his own desires and guard his own heart. His story is a powerful and timeless warning that the greatest kingdom any of us will ever be called to govern is the one inside ourselves.